What's your story? If you had a 20-minute TED Talk about your life, what's the content going to be like? Is it tales of your moments of triumph or a sad recollection of your failures? Either way, both of those stories have a lot of similarities. One of those similarities is that they're told through your point of view, which means they can have a lot of inaccuracies, which could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on whatever context it is. And these stories might not even be entirely true. We tend to fill in the blanks with our own unique biases, which is like the lens that we use to determine how we perceive things. And these biases are extremely important because they essentially affect every aspect of our life going forward. The most crucial thing about someone's life story is not necessarily what happened, but it's about the conclusions that we draw from what happened. Theoretically, two people with an identical experience, one that had a meaningful impact on their life, would draw two different conclusions about themselves based on that experience. These conclusions would affect the way that each individual's story or narrative is told from that point on. The way that someone tells their life story or the way that someone narrates their own life is going to greatly impact the way that someone lives their life. Bad things may have happened, but that does not need to be the theme of our story going forward. By taking a step back and observing how we narrate our life experiences, we can begin to change our path in life in a way that we desire. And that is why in today's video, I'm going to be discussing the topic of life narrative or life story, whichever word you like better, and the impact that it has on us throughout our life and how we can start telling a better story today. So let's start by talking about the story of my life. And no, I don't mean the One Direction song, but the story of my life for a long time was a story of a victim. I was a victim because I had diabetes. I was a victim because I got bullied in middle school. And I was a victim because I felt invisible to women. And what was the result? A continuation of the same story. I continue to be a victim going forward, and absolutely nothing changed. It just kept getting worse. I justified this gradual worsening of my life being a result of my past experiences. I was a victim, and that's just who I was, right? Technically, I wasn't wrong. I was letting those past experiences influence the rest of my life, but I didn't know that it did not have to be that way. I had a choice, and we all have that choice. It wasn't until I realized that I had this choice, the choice to write my own destiny, that I finally felt free. Free of my past, and free of what I imagined to be a pretty awful future. I did not know where I would end up, and honestly I still really don't know. That's kind of up in the air, but I do know it's a lot better than what I was previously imagining. In a few weeks I went from being pretty depressed and unmotivated to slightly less depressed, definitely more optimistic, and a little bit more motivated. It was a good start, and in a few months it was solidified. I had proved to myself through my actions that I did have the power to write my own story. For once in my life, I felt strength, regardless of the uncertainty. If you're someone who doesn't think like I did, or maybe you're someone who does think like I did, either way you might be wondering, why would anyone think like that? And the answer is trauma. It messes people up. Subjectively, I don't think that the things that happened to me were really that bad. I mean, take a look at any poverty country or Gaza, right? Like, what happened to me wasn't even a fraction of that. But as a kid, you interpret things in whatever way, and I interpreted those things as proof of what I was lacking and my own personal faults. So some traumas may be better or worse than another, but it really comes down to the interpretation. One kid might interpret something as trauma, and another might think that was a walk in the park. Again, the event that happened is less important than the effects that it has on the brain. So the worst thing that happens to somebody, as little as it could be, like some spoiled rich kid getting their car in the wrong color. I don't know, I saw that on TV. I thought that was kind of funny. But if that's the worst thing that happened to somebody, it's the worst thing that happened to them. And if the brain or the body interprets something as trauma, well, it's a trauma. And that trauma has the potential to wreak continuous havoc on a person's life. It can negatively affect relationships, self-confidence, and just general beliefs about the world and life. These traumas that affect us for the rest of our life usually happen as children, And that's because when we're kids, we don't understand things, the nuance of life, the complexity. There's so many reasons why things could have happened, and we're very egocentric. So we think that everything, the world revolves around us. We don't realize until we get in the real world that it doesn't. But at the time, when you think in that way, traumas can cause kids to draw false conclusions about themselves or about the world, and these false conclusions can negatively affect their behavior and beliefs for the rest of their lives. If behaviors are negatively affected, such as how they act in a relationship, that's considered maladaptive behavior. If their beliefs are negatively affected, such as how they think about relationships, that is considered negative core beliefs or just negative bias. So, an example of this in play would be someone pushing people away, which is the maladaptive behavior, because they believe that they can't trust people and are off better alone, which would be the negative core beliefs. These behaviors and beliefs would perpetuate this person's cycle of loneliness and relationship problems. With beliefs and behaviors like that, the outcomes of your life are probably going to suck. So, how could someone feel motivated to change their story and narrative given that their outcomes are just continuously negative? By using the method of cognitive reframing. If someone is constantly telling themselves a negative story and as a result they're experiencing continuous negative outcomes, it makes sense that they would feel unmotivated. This person is ultimately deeming themselves powerless to change. Why would someone try if they already know how things will end up? Well, allow me to introduce one of my favorite psychological practices, cognitive reframing. This is the process of changing how we interpret or frame an event, which in turn changes how we feel about it, and it changes the conclusions that we draw from it. To break it down, our brains are wired to make sense of the world by creating connections and drawing meaning from experiences, also known as neuroplasticity. When something happens, especially something negative, we often develop a story around it that can reinforce negative beliefs such as, I'm not good enough, or bad things always happen to me. These narratives might feel true, but the power of cognitive reframing is you realize they don't have to be. Cognitive reframing requires us to pause and examine the narratives that we've constructed. We have to think about what other perspectives could we bring? Is there a way to tell this story differently? Instead of viewing a past failure as proof of our lack or our inadequacy, we could view it as a learning experience that we can grow from. Reframing is not about denying that bad things happen, but rather drawing different conclusions from them and allowing them to move us forward instead of keeping us stuck in the past. So here's the 4-step process for practicing cognitive reframing, and I'm going to use the example that I used earlier about the person having negative relationship beliefs and behaviors in order to highlight each step in practice. Number 1, identify your narrative. Start by taking a closer look at the story you're telling yourself. What are some of the recurring themes? Are you often the victim or the victor? Write down the beliefs that you hold about yourself and your experiences. And this is going to be your baseline, and that's how you'll know what you're trying to change. So for example, someone with a negative point of view on relationships might notice that they have been victims of past relationships and that going forward, people can't be trusted and they're better off alone. They might want to adjust these beliefs to being more open to people and not as closed off. Number 2, challenge negative thoughts. So once you've identified these narratives, you need to question them. You got to ask things like, is this really true? What evidence do I have to support it? And often you'll find that the beliefs you're holding are usually exaggerated. And this is where the magic happens, because when you challenge the thoughts, you can create space for new interpretations. So someone with the negative relationship stuff might ask themselves, are all people untrustworthy, or were just the people that hurt me the untrustworthy ones? And another question could be, am I really happy being alone, or do I just tell myself that in order to avoid being let down again? Number 3, look for alternative explanations. Pretty simple. For every negative thought or belief, just try to come up with at least 1 or 2, maybe even 3 alternative explanations. So someone with a negative point of view on relationships could shift from thinking all people are untrustworthy over to this specific person was untrustworthy. They could also think, well, some people obviously trust other people and they seem to be doing fine, so clearly some people must be trustworthy. The fourth and final step, reframe your experiences. So you want to shift your focus from what went wrong to what went right, or what you gained from the experience. If you faced a setback, consider it a stepping stone instead of just a complete roadblock. You want to reflect on how overcoming challenges had made you stronger. Someone with negative views on relationships could shift from thinking, they hurt me, I knew they would, I can't trust anybody, over to, I learned to watch out for blank behaviors. Another thought could be, I learned that I need to set boundaries. Instead of viewing these experiences and using them to confirm the negative views they already have, they can reframe the thoughts to see how the experiences have made them better equipped at catching on to signs of toxicity before they get attached to that person. And an important thing to keep in mind here, like almost anything that I talk about, it takes time and it takes practice. Cognitive reframing is a skill, and it's really important to be patient with yourself as you begin the practice. In time, you will find that you have the power to always control the narrative of your own life, and it allows you to shape it into ways that just benefit you way more overall. It really all comes down to being aware that it is your choice, and you might not always make the right one. I definitely don't, and that's perfectly okay. Just being aware of these things is awesome because awareness is the first step towards change. That's it. That's all I got for y'all today. Just remember, everything you're telling yourself might not be 100% true because it's all in your head, right? If you feel like things aren't working out for you because of the way you're thinking, consider trying cognitive reframing and seeing how that goes for you. I know for a fact that cognitive reframing definitely changed my life. It opened lots of doors that I thought were closed, and I'm really thankful that I learned about it. I hope you feel the same way after trying it, and I really hope that you found my explanation of these things to be useful and making sense. If I sound like I'm talking nonsense here, or if I'm not explaining something enough, please let me know. I'm always open to comments and constructive criticisms, trying to get better as always. But yeah, that's really it. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that. Also hit that like button, all that YouTube stuff. And I appreciate y'all stopping in today, checking out this content, taking the time to better yourself. And I'll see y'all in the next one. Take care, everybody.